The Steve Cortes Show, that means that it is the Happiness Hour. And the Happiness Hour doesn't necessarily mean that we only talk about happy things, although we certainly try to include some happy subjects, particularly at a time like this, with a lot of anxiety, with a crisis going on economically, health-wise in the world. But what it mainly means is that we pivot away from politics, and we talk about the other things that make life meaningful: faith, culture, fitness, food, things that are both serious and silly. We try to throw it all in and talk about them on Fridays during this hour. And so, look, a lot of us are locked down right now. Almost everybody's locked down to some degree or another. A lot of you are essential workers and still going to work. I'm certainly working, as is very obvious by me doing this program right now. But regardless of whether you are leaving to go to work or not, a lot of us are hunkered down. Everybody's hunkered down to some extent, which means we've got a lot of time to consume media, a lot of screen time going on out there. And to help us discern how we should spend our screen time, I'm really pleased to be joined again by a friend of the show, Jacob Airy. He is a movie reviewer, and really more than just movies. He's an all-around, I would say, media critic. Does a lot of writing, podcasting, and I think he just has terrific insight into all kinds of, whether it's TV shows, movies, comics, you name it. Jacob covers it and does so really well. So, Jacob, thank you for being on the show. And I want to let you talk about, too, because you've been on a few times, and I'm guessing some of our listeners are fans, if they want to follow up on you and read your writing, where should they go?
They should check out my website. It's jacobairy.blog, just my name, JacobAiry.blog. And my YouTube channel, StudioJake. It's just youtube.com/C/StudioJake. I continue conversations about, like you said, comic books, movies, television, even books. I try to throw out novel suggestions as well for my fellow fiction readers, and that's pretty much where everyone can find me. Of course, I'm on Twitter and Instagram. They're both, and Parler. They're all three at Real Jacob Airy, so you can find me at all of those platforms there.
Excellent. I didn't know that you do book reviews as well. Okay, well, we'll have you back sometime to talk literature then. But for today, we're going to talk media, not books. We're going to talk about, as I said, sort of screen time. What should be people doing? What should they be movies they should be watching, and what should they be binge watching? Speaking of watching, one thing that I want to throw out there, folks, and I am not qualified the way Jacob is as a TV or movie reviewer, but I'm going to tell you, and I've talked about it a few times, that The Last Dance, the documentary on ESPN of the Chicago Bulls, their sixth and final championship season under Michael Jordan. Parts 1 and 2 debuted last week. They're going to be re-shown this Sunday night, and then parts 3 and 4, the new episodes that we haven't yet seen, immediately after. So if you're really a sports nut, and if you're jonesing for sports the way I am right now, you can get 4 hours. And the first two, because I've already seen them last week, were just fantastic. And I'm saying that obviously from the super biased perspective of a Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan sort of super fan. But I think even if I weren't a Bulls fan, I would have really enjoyed it. And I actually did hear during the show, I was really surprised, pleasantly surprised, how many people I knew were texting me about it who are not Bulls fans. Some of them were actually Bulls haters. But everyone respects Michael Jordan, even if they're not Bulls fans. And this was just, in my mind, a really, really well-done documentary, at least part 1 and 2. And it's a lot of behind-the-scenes, never-before-seen footage, and it will take you back to sort of the glory days of the Chicago Bulls. And as I said, for people like me who are really jonesing right now for some sports, it's not live sports, but I think it's the next best thing. But Jacob, let us know, because you are the expert in this arena. What do you recommend right now? What should people be watching out there at home?
Well, if you have family, you have kids, you want to watch something that the kids can enjoy and not worry about the content, but also where it has, something a little bit more action, I recommend A Series of Unfortunate Events. It's a Netflix original series with Neil Patrick Harris. Mm-hmm. It adapts the book series by Lemony Snicket. Of course, that's his pen name. But I read those books when I was a teenager. I read all of them, all 13. They're fantastic books. And one thing I like about the show is the last book left like a lot of cliffhangers. That's just the nature of how the books were. Okay. But fortunately, the Netflix series ends more well-rounded. It's great for the kids. I believe it's got 3 seasons, and I believe there's only 1 cuss word in the whole series, something like that. Okay. So you can watch it with your kids. It is there are some scary stuff that happens in the show, but nothing where you have to cover your kids' eyes and worry about the content. Right. So I definitely recommend that.
Okay. And is it a long series? So when you say binge watch, I mean, do you have to dedicate a lot of time if you want to watch it all?
Yeah, it's got they break up each book into 2 parts, And so it's got a total of 26 episodes, I believe.
Okay.
The last episode is like movie length because they wanted to do it completely. So there is a little bit of a commitment, but if you've got kids, it's something you can put on and enjoy with them.
Right. Well, and a lot of people with kids. I will say this. So, all of my kids, now all 4 of them are doing school online and from the university level all the way down to grade school. So, they are reasonably busy, but of course they're not as busy as they were when they were physically in school. So, people have time right now. That's one thing they have. And unfortunately, I know you're in California where the weather's fantastic. Right now, we're having a typical Chicago April, which means it's freezing and it stinks. So in Chicago, we tend to go from absolutely frigid to hot and humid in a nanosecond. We don't have much of a spring here. So there's ample opportunity for people to be inside. Okay, and what else, Jacob? What else do you recommend? Doesn't necessarily have to be family friendly. And I know we're going to talk in the next segment about Mrs. America, but what else do you recommend for folks out there? What should they be watching with their screen time now?
I also really enjoyed the Innocence Files. It's got 6 episodes, I believe, and it's about the Innocence Project, about recent cases where they were able to free men and women who were in prison wrongfully through DNA testing. Really good work that they do. I really was enthralled by some of the stories, just how some of these guys were in the wrong place, the wrong time, the witness made a mistake. Those kinds of stories came up a lot.
Okay.
And I highly recommend that. And this one is more for mom and dad. I would recommend kids just because of the content, some of the crimes involved.
Sure.
But I do think it was really interesting just to see how the justice system. I personally like the American system, obviously, but sometimes things fall through the cracks, and so it's really cool that we have an organization like the Innocence Project to help set these people free who are wrongfully accused.
And is this a dramatization or this is a documentary on it?
It's a documentary series.
Okay.
So it goes from each episode, except for the first 2, follow different cases.
Mm-hmm.
And the first 2 episodes, it's 2 different cases, but they're connected because it's the same town and the same prosecutor.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a little bit of a connection there as far as it goes. But yeah, I highly recommend it. It's done in documentary style. Interviews the people involved, interviews the people who were released. It's very enthralling.
Oh, cool. I'll check that one out. I love true crime stuff, and I think that there's an appetite for it. Clearly, it seems out there in the country. I mean, there's so many shows, whether they're documentary style or they're fictitious, that are based on those kind of themes. I thought, for instance, in podcast world, I thought that Serial, which was done here in Chicago by the NPR station in Chicago, was just fantastic. Looking into and very much sort of an Innocence Project type approach, right? Did he do it? Was Adnan the killer? And by the way, I think most people really don't know, quite frankly, which I think is part of the effect of the power of that Serial podcast miniseries, and it certainly, I think, spawned more such podcasts. But also want to ask you, okay, listen, let's a quick trivia question here. Not really trivia, but just get your opinion. Because I mentioned the weather's terrible, we're hoping in Chicago that's going to change, and we're hoping that Mayflowers are right around the corner. Some flowers are already out there, of course. So that makes me think of summertime, and I want to know, and I'll tell you the correct answer, but I want to know what you think. What is the best summer-themed movie ever, Jacob?
In my humblest of opinions, I think it's North Shore. It stars Matt Adler as a surfer who is from California originally, but he moves from Arizona originally, but he moves to Hawaii and to pursue his dream of being a professional surfer. It's got Matt Adler from Teen Wolf. For those of you who remember Teen Wolf, it's directed by William Phelps. Fantastic film. It's about him getting used to the culture of Hawaii while also practicing. He falls in love with a local girl played by Nia Peoples. Really great class, a really great cast, really great story. I highly recommend it. And like I said, that's just my personal favorite film. As far as summertime films.
North Shore. The name of it is North Shore after the North Shore of Hawaii. Yeah.
Yes, North Shore Hawaii. It came out in 1967. Really great drama and film.
An older one. I'd never heard of that. I'm going to have to see North Shore. And I am providing the correct answers because, look, this is 560 The Answer. We give you the answers at this station, and I'm going to give the answer to what is the best summer movie ever. I just asked Jacob Airy, who I'm very pleased to have as our guest. He's a superb writer and movie reviewer, all-around media critic, friend of the show, been on many times. He's given us some of his picks for what we should be watching during this hunkered down time during this lockdown session where a lot of people are spending more time on screens than they typically do. And I'm looking forward to summer because even though it doesn't feel very summery out there, summer is right around the corner. And something we, of course, very much need in the city of Chicago after a pretty cold April so far. So best summer movie ever. Jacob said North Shore, which is from the 1960s, surfer-oriented movie set in Hawaii. I haven't seen it, so I actually can't comment on it. But the correct answer for the best summer movie ever is Jaws, in my opinion. Even though it's a movie that in some ways kind of ruined summer. I'm not sure if this is really true or if it's just urban legend, but allegedly beach attendance and ocean swimming was vastly down when that movie came out. It scared the crap out of a lot of Americans. I've never looked into that if that's statistically true, but that's what I've been told. But I do think that Jaws was a fantastic summer movie. I'll also give a hat tip to Caddyshack, which I think is very much a summer movie. And for me personally, I caddied when I was a kid. I think I was 12 or 13 years old when I first went and caddied at Olympia Fields Country Club, which, of course, is one of the best golf courses, not just in the Chicago area, but in America. And I happen to live very close to there. And I went there as a young lad, and I had lived in a pretty protected kind of bubble at my parochial school and a very conservative family. And let me tell you something, I learned a lot in the caddy shack, and most of it wasn't very good. It was very eye-opening for a relatively innocent boy to hang around the caddy shack with a lot of rough and tumble characters. But it was also good. Taught me how to work and make money and get in shape and get a tan, albeit a caddy tan. But I'd say Caddyshack's second best summer movie after Jaws in my highly non-professional opinion. But let's go back to the professional, to Jacob Airy, and get his opinion on movies. What are a couple of movies, please, Jacob, that we ought to be watching these days?
On Hulu, for those of you who are Hulu subscribers, I highly recommend Changeland. It stars and is directed by Seth Green, and it's about this guy who finds out that his wife is cheating on him, and so he goes on this trip to Asia, and it is a little slower, so you have to take that with knowing that going into the pacing. But it's a very charming film about him, rediscovering his confidence and rediscovering himself. And normally I don't like those kinds of films because they always have, very secularized kind of ideas. But this one really focuses on spirituality. I highly recommend it.
Okay, great.
Changeland on Hulu. And for those of you who like me, who like action, I recommend Extraction on Netflix. It just came out today. It stars Chris Hemsworth, and it's produced by Joe Mantegna, who, of course, did Avengers Endgame. Fantastic film. It's about a mercenary who has to rescue a drug lord's son, and he's like 12 or 13, and he has to be rescued from Mumbai, India, and he has to escape. And it's a very great action film. Wouldn't watch it with the kids. Got a ton of violence, but I highly recommend it. It's very action-packed, lots of explosions.
Okay.
For our family, on Disney Plus, I recommend Pixar's Onward. It's a great film. It's got an amazing voice cast about these two boys who are elves, and their father has passed away, and they are given a staff that can bring him back for one day, but something goes wrong with the spell, and he only comes back halfway, so they have to find a way to bring him back completely so they can spend the day with him. It's a very good film about fatherhood and about brotherhood. You don't see a lot of films aimed at young boys. This one is, and I highly recommend it. It's very wholesome. You can watch it with the whole family.
Very cool. Excellent. I appreciate it. Now, I also want to ask you about Mrs. America, which is a series on FX. And even though I say we don't do politics in this hour, it's a little bit unavoidable with this topic because, of course, the series is about politics. It's about Phyllis Schlafly, who was really the primary and most persuasive and effective opponent of the feminist movement, of the ERA movement, in the 1960s into the 1970s in the United States. And so FX has done this series on Mrs. America. Now, I have not seen any of it, so I want to get your opinion on it, but also want to just hear right out of the gate. My guess is that it's a hit piece, that FX is doing everything it can to make an amazing woman, and I think Phyllis Schlafly was an amazing woman, probably trying to make her into a caricature, but you tell me and tell the listeners, please.
They don't really make her into a caricature, that's what I was expecting as well. They actually portray her very intelligently. Mm-hmm. She's very smart. They show her to be a good mother to her children, at times a little rough with them, but still a good mother. Mm-hmm. However, they do throw in some seasoning. They create this character named Mary Frances, who supposedly stops representative in like the Louisiana area. Of course, they make her a racist. I actually did some research, found out that person does not exist. She was created by the FX series to try to connect some racism to the Stop ERA movement, which I thought was just appalling. But to Kate Blanchett's credit, she does a great job as Phyllis. I believe even Anne, Phyllis's daughter, has said she likes Kate. She just doesn't like the writing and how they're portraying her. So it's not a total hit piece because it also shows kind of the chaos of the feminism movement, how they were divided and split, how the Democrats took advantage of them.
Okay.
But it's like they want to have, kind of like with Bombshell, they want to have their cake and eat it too. So they want to portray her, not where she's this sinister figure, but they also want to try to throw in some stuff to make it look like it was like she was worse than she actually was. So that's kind of how I am viewing the series. So not an outright hit piece, but definitely making her look worse than she was.
Sure. Okay. Well, and that's, I consider that almost a win, right? If they're only shading it, rather than just completely fabricating, whole cloth, narratives against her. So, okay, that's interesting. I will watch that then because I think Phyllis Schlafly is just an incredible historical figure. I got to meet her once when I was in college. And I thought she was so impressive in person. I mean, just honestly, one of the most charismatic and poised and smart people that I've ever heard give a speech. I mean, I'm sure had she wanted to run for office, she could have gone extremely far in that arena. But of course, she had massive political influence and cultural influence regardless. And I do like Kate Blanchett a lot as an actress. And she's very acclaimed, right? She's won a couple of Oscars, right? Didn't she win for Aviation, I believe? Or The Aviator.
Yes, I believe so.
For The Aviator, yeah. The reason I said aviation is in my next guest, we're going to be talking about topics related to aviation, but for Aviator, I think she won Best Supporting. By the way, I think that is a fantastic movie. It gets really weird because Howard Hughes got really weird, but talk about a complicated figure. I mean, somebody who was just in real life, both incredible and a complete visionary, but then also in some ways, really just a reprehensible character, a very, very complicated man. And I think that movie did a great job of capturing him. I also so respect Kate Blanchett's an Aussie. I think people who can pull off accents well, and I know these actors obviously get trained to do it, but people who can pull off accents really, really well is pretty incredible. And I did see some of the clips of her as Phyllis Schlafly, and she sounds just like her. And you would certainly never know that she's not an American. You wouldn't know that she's Australian. So she did you think artistically this was good acting from Kate?
Oh, yeah, 100%. And the same with the whole cast. Everyone, artistically, they do phenomenal jobs.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, well, no, listen, I'm glad to hear that from you then. I'm going to check that out. I definitely also want to see the documentary on the Innocence Project. You've given us all some homework here and hopefully some enjoyment, some things that we can watch regarding our screen time. And again, my recommendation to everybody, if you have a sports bent at all, is turn on The Last Dance Sunday night on ESPN. Jacob Berry, thank you so much for being my guest today. Really appreciate it. As I mentioned, we're going to talk up next about aviation and specifically about a group that is using planes to save animals. Up next.